Now to the event proper. Welcome to the Writer Center Virtual Craft Chat, where we talk to authors a little bit less about what they wrote and a little bit more about how they wrote it. We are here to talk with Sara Kehaulani Goo to celebrate her absolutely phenomenal book, Kuleana. Um, and I would ask you, Sara, first of all, thank you for joining us. To start by giving everybody a taste of the book that they are either lucky enough to have bought or will buy immediately after this chat, and then thank me.
Um, well, hello and aloha to everyone. Thank you for taking time to have this conversation. I love talking about writing, and I'm a big fan of the Writer Center. And let me just say, it's such a treasure in our community to have a place like this. I feel very lucky, and I used the Writer Center when I was writing and researching my book. So it's a wonderful, quiet place for me to get away from my young kids at the time and write. So I have a lot of gratitude for that. So it's nice full circle to be here and have this conversation. But my book Kuleana came out in June this past summer. It's a book that took me more than a decade to write. I don't know if that's inspiring or discouraging. Hopefully, that is inspiring that it finally made it. It's a story of persistence, I suppose. But it's a memoir. It's part reported history about my family's struggle to hold on to our ancestral land on the island of Maui. But really, I wanted to tell a story that kind of drew the through line of history of the Hawaiian people and a new narrative about Hawaii that I felt was never represented in America and known, really. And that tells the story of land and displacement, and a culture that's really fighting for survival, a language and hula and all the beautiful parts of it, that I think, if you've ever been to Hawaii, you know how infectious that is. And what makes that place so special. So it's part of me, but it's also, at the same time, a personal journey, a story of identity, and a story very real, as a majority of Native Hawaiian people live outside of Hawaii now. And that's because they can't afford to live there, when the average home is $1.3 million. So that is, a story not unlike what is happening in many parts of the United States. And so, what does that mean to be Native Hawaiian when you don't live in Hawaii and never have lived there, and now raising children, 5,000 miles away, like I am? So that's something that a kind of uncomfortable question that I asked myself as well. And so this book has many layers, and so maybe that's why it took so long for me to figure out if this would fit all of that into one book. But I think I managed to do it.
You did too. Can you read us a page or two
Sure.
or three?
I was thinking about what made most sense to read, and I'm going to just assume most people haven't read the book. So I thought the best place would be to start at the beginning. So I'll read a few pages. This is actually the introduction. The introduction is called Aina, and I hope everybody can hear me okay. Along the rugged shores of Maui's east coast, bright blue waves crash into the black rock coastline that from above frames the rainforest like a postcard of paradise. A light breeze smells like the wild guava trees that grow abundantly on the island, mixed with salty air whipped up from the ocean, a perfume found only here in the middle of the Pacific. And around every bend and the winding road that weaves through here, a breathtaking waterfall spills from the cliffs above, sometimes into a natural swimming hole that tempts you to stop and take a cool dip. This is one of the last remaining places of the real Hawaii, untouched by international hotels or tacky bus tours. These are my family's ancestral Hawaiian lands. For centuries, these lands were the crown jewels of Native Hawaiian royalty, who relished the lush green landscape ideal for growing crops, and the shoreline known for its plentiful fish, sharks, octopus, and shellfish. This land is also full of stories or passed down mo'olelo that tells legends of bloody battles waged between island chiefs who fought for control over this rich bounty. Other mo'olelo explain the formation of dozens of beautiful pools with waterfalls that cascade one pool into the next, down the mountain, or the cave whose water mysteriously turns pink once a year. Perched along the coastline sits an enormous native Hawaiian temple called a heiau, made of rocks meticulously stacked nearly 4 stories high. The heiau is a remnant of the ancient Hawaiian religion and culture that thrived here centuries ago. More than 90 acres of this land, from the road to the sea, now worth many millions of dollars, are still owned by my family, the Kahanu family. This is just a fraction of the original, much larger landholding given to my ancestor by King Kamehameha III in 1848. And for the most part, this land has remained exactly as it was some 175 years ago: raw, undeveloped, wild. It is overgrown with thick hollow trees, whose broomstick like roots stand high above the ground and whose thin, sharp leaves serve as nature's barbed wire fence, keeping out curious hikers. Spindly papaya trees peep up in the distance, serving up their yellow fruit for the birds that chirp out loudly but can't be seen. A single dirt road, which floods several times a year after sudden bursts of thunderstorms, divides the land parcels belonging to my grandma, our family, her descendants, and my aunties and uncles and cousins. Our ancestors are buried in marked graves a few hundred yards from the base of the ancient temple, permanent evidence of our connection to a mysterious, centuries old structure that was once central to the people of this island. On the land adjacent to it, a few landmarks and memories are all that help delineate where one cousin's property starts and another's ends. All we know is that our family, the Kahanu family, promised to take care of this land and the heiau for centuries. No matter that no one has money to build a house on their parcel of land or pay the water company to build a line to it. No matter, because having this land allows us to hold on to a small piece of the past. That past was a time before the United States of America existed, and when Hawaii was not a vacation spot, but an island nation with its own system of chiefs, gods, and kings, thriving and isolated by vast oceans on every side. This land is not merely land, at least in the way Western eyes see it. The land is heritage. The land is evidence of our survival. The land, the Aina, is our Kuleana, our responsibility. I'll stop there.
Thank you. That's a perfectly folds us into the next question I want to ask you. Oh, someone's whiteboard.
Oh, wow.
Zach. Good. Okay. Um, it was a beautiful whiteboard. Thank you for that palette cleanser. So uh, I'd like you to talk about Zach. I would not like you to talk about Zach. I'd like you to talk about Kuleana, not so much in terms of the actual meaning, maybe briefly in terms of the meaning, but how, as a writer, you use that thread to take us through both the journal. I mean, one of the things that I love so much about this book is how you used journalism to boost the emotion in the memoir. So, if you could briefly explain how does what is Kuleana and how does it work as a literary theme?
Yeah, so the word kuleana obviously is a Hawaiian word, and it means responsibility. And I kind of use the word as a metaphor for, me trying to understand the meaning of that word, and its interpretation from a Western sense is where I start. The word responsibility has With the way we think about it is the thing we have to do and a kind of burden on our back, a thing that we tick through a checklist every day. And by the end of this book, I come to embrace Kuleana in a Hawaiian understanding of that word, which is a prideful responsibility, a generational responsibility. So it reflects my evolution of appreciation, of another way of understanding the meaning of what that word is, and another context, and the way that my father and grandmother and her grandmother understood it and passed it on to me. So what is it is not a burden that's tied to the land in this context, but it's also tied to my heritage and my identity. So there's a lot that weaves through it. And so I felt that it was a perfect word for the title of this book, too.
Thank you. So I'm going to jump to a different question I had, which is related. So there, Kuleana underlines all the themes in this book. You've got family, tradition, heritage, taxes, history, capitalism, ritual, and I really felt like you know Kuleana underlies all of that. So how did you? What do you see as the book's main themes?
Yes, I feel like I think what took me so long is I had a lot going on, and working with my editor, I realized that I really needed to pick like just one or two narratives to focus on that I could follow, like the reader, help the reader through the whole book, right? If that's what you mean. And so the two narratives were about solving this land crisis, which is we're about to lose the land, and how do we solve this as a family? How do we the practicalities of how we did this together? And the other narrative was, how do I confront what is this land? Even if we solve the problem of land, what does it mean for me? And as a woman who is Native Hawaiian, am I Native Hawaiian? Can I really claim that? And how do I, if I do, how do I pass that on to my children? How do I embrace my Kuleana? How do I live that in my own life? What does that look like as a woman who is so far away? Is that even possible? I think that was an uncomfortable question that I faced for myself, and so it was the practicalities of solving the land, and then the real internal question for myself.
So that's to me that's very interesting to me because so as a journalist, you're used to fact checking, right? And so I guess before I ask you about how you worked that against the emotional, personal parts, let's talk about the journalistic part, the research that you did going back, hundreds of years, and what were your sources, and how did you organize your material, and all the
Mhm.
question that I mean, I've written two reported pieces, and it was exhausting. I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what anybody says about fake news, there's a lot of fact checking that goes behind research in good journalism.
Yes.
So
Yeah, one challenge I had was that a lot of Hawaiian history is hard to find, especially here on the continent. So I took a lot of, and a lot of was not online. So just one example is I did a lot, I initially thought I would write a book about the mysteries of this heiau and what it was and what its past was. And, that would be a way into the story. But I didn't really find very much. I mean, I found like PhD dissertations about it in the archives of, a university. And I realized that so much of Hawaiian history just sadly is in, find, rare print books at the Bishop Museum or the University of Hawaii, and is very expensive to buy online, or you have to go in person and, microfiche. And so I did a lot of that, and it's, expensive to fly out there, but that's a lot of what I did. in the beginning. And then a lot of it is in Hawaiian. So I faced that challenge of trying to translate or find people who would help me translate. And then there's a lot of cultural things about even asking for that help, right? So,
Excuse me,
uh,
what do you mean?
well, some people think that you really need to learn the language and you shouldn't ask somebody to translate. But that's challenging when you don't live in Hawaii. And there's more resources today, more opportunities to learn the language online. But, when I started initially researching this 10, 12 years ago, no, not really. When I started researching this, there wasn't even a Wikipedia page about this heiau. So, it just was very hard in the beginning. And I think that that's part of the story I ended up wanting to write is the sadness I felt about discovering that the history of your people doesn't really exist in a book. And for someone who feels like every fact should be found in a book or that's where I went and I would need those original sources. It felt like the history of my people didn't deserve to be written as very sad to confront.
Trying to decide which direction to go with 1,000 questions. Did you find histories written on the continent to be different than those you found in Hawaii?
Honestly, I didn't find a lot of history even written about Hawaii in textbooks. I mean, the history I learned about Hawaii, and I doubt it's different for anybody on this call, was like Pearl Harbor on, right? And the United States becomes a state and everyone's happy. Uh, there's quite like there's centuries of history before that that are quite amazing. Hawaiian language is a oral tradition, like a lot of indigenous languages. So, but amazing. One fun fact is like, did you know that Hawaii was one of the most literate nations in the world at one time? They embraced the printing press. The missionaries came in the 1800s and educated the Hawaiian people, created a written language, and there were like hundreds of Hawaiian newspapers. And so there are like a lot of Hawaiian, printed, stories, and, you know, um, evidence of their daily life, but it's in Hawaiian and it needs to be translated. So I think I learned a ton, but I think that it didn't exist, in California where I grew up, and I think is just not well known.
Thank you. Did you use oral history as a source in the book?
I did. I think one breakthrough for me was I realized I really needed to seek out experts in Hawaii who were, really, sometimes professors, sometimes just known as elders and, knowledgeable people. And in Hawaii, they're called kupuna, who I had to learn from. And I think I had to approach a lot of my research with a lot of humility. And I think that goes a long way, that I knew it was really clear that I knew I had a lot to learn and I wanted to learn. And I took my time. I knew that it was going to take time. So that was my approach with this. I didn't know in the beginning, to be honest, like what story or what book I wanted to write. I just knew in my heart that the real story about the real Hawaii needed to be told. And I knew in my heart that I wanted to tell it to a very big audience that deserved to know. And so I didn't really seek to write about myself. In fact, I'm sure, as a journalist, I resisted that probably for quite a long time. But when this crisis happened with my family's land, it kind of felt like inevitable that this was just the vehicle to do that.
Or, thank you. I have a very quick side question. And by the way, we do welcome questions. You're welcome to throw questions in the chat if you'd like to. Um, Speaking of language and books, I have a personal interest in watching the evolution of the way the publishing industry treats non-English words. in books, and there's a lot of Hawaii in the book. Was
Yeah.
that an issue? And I felt like it was its own subplot. I think that's a really important piece of your journey is about the language. Was that an issue that came up with your editors at all in terms of how
No, I
to how
mean,
to
yeah, I decided to put pronouncers of Hawaiian words in the story. I mean, in the book, as I went along, and I also decided to do a glossary at the end. I'm not sure if I, needed to do that, right? But I, thought it would be helpful. But again, I wanted to reach, I was, really was writing for two audiences. And there's a conversation I wanted to have with people who weren't familiar with Hawaii, but perhaps always wanted to go or learn more about it. And I felt that I'm not going to assume that everyone knows how to pronounce Hawaiian words, and I wanted to be helpful to them. I'm not going to assume everybody knows the meaning of Hawaiian words. Hawaiian words have multiple meanings. And so I kind of wanted to be your friendly, your friend, guiding you and taking you to a place I know. And wanted that to be as comfortable an experience as I could make it. And I think that when you pronounce the words in in your head as a reader, I think that's important part of the experience. And so if you're, stumbling across it in your mind, you're not fully going to absorb the essence of the language and understand the rhythm of this language is very beautiful. And it's full of vowels and it makes your mouth say ah-oh and ka-oh and ee and it's beautiful that way and lyrical. So I wanted to help the reader through that. I know not all authors feel that way, but I think Hawaiian is a very unique language. It nearly became extinct, and I write about that like other indigenous languages, and it's a wonderful story that it has revived itself. It not revived itself. The Native Hawaiians brought it back to life. And it's a wonderful, rare story of indigenous language that has come back to life because its people pushed it to be so. And I think that's a rare, wonderful story.
question from the chat? The question is, did you have any resistance from your family while writing the book? And I'm going to reframe that a little bit to get to another question or two that I had, which was,
Yeah.
how did your family, did you bring your family into the process? And in particular, I was curious because your children were part of the story. And as a writer myself, it's always a question of how do you handle personal moments that are published?
Yeah. This book involved so many of my family members, and I have a big Hawaiian family, so it involved elders, it involved people who were deceased by the time the book was published, and it involved, of course, my children. And so, what I did was I really felt like I needed to be clear and transparent with everybody I talked to in my family about my intentions. And as I mentioned it, I think that one benefit of this, it did take me a very long time to write the book. And so for a long time, I was really just saying, I'm researching our family story. I want to write about our family story. I want to understand our family story. And I heard this, and is this true? And what happened this time? And, what about Uncle so and so? And what about, and some family members like, I would seek out the family genealogist first, actually. And there's always one in every family. And my mother is that person. And she's not from the Hawaiian side, but she is like the ancestry.com person in our family. And I have an auntie on my dad's side that is, and I have a great aunt and who is. So it's just like those are some of the people I started with. And then they would point me in other directions. And so I think that I was just always transparent about what I was doing and transparent about where I was in the process. And so for me, like there was no surprises, just like that's how I operate as a journalist as well. And so, that was true even when we got to, drafts of the book. I didn't. want anybody to be surprised, and even difficult parts, of that we're writing about, stories or parts of the sensitive things about our family disagreements that were very, very hurtful. I wrote about because I had no choice but to be brutally honest. And at the end, I think one of the most satisfying things is that those family members thanked me,
Oh,
and were so grateful. And one of my some of my biggest cheerleaders at my book events. Uh, and so that's to me, I did a solid.
it is
So
so interesting to me because a lot of times people who write memoir or personal essay, the assumption is always that you're going to hurt somebody. And I love the fact that I loved you saying, maybe it'll help. Maybe people will see things differently.
yeah.
Um,
I
that's
mean,
beautiful.
one of the amazing things is it's brought my family together, and I've met so many other extended members of my family as a result of this book too, which is great. And they've like said, so many extended members of my family have said, I learned so much more about my family. I appreciate my family. I'm going to now go to spend more time, and become more engaged with our family land. And so that has been wonderful to hear too.
Really, really interesting. Thank you. Another question from the chat is about your writing process. Do you follow a schedule for when or how long to write? And I want to add on to that and say that because your day job is a writer as well. Uh, how do you draw those lines, and does it blend them? Are you
Yeah.
keyboarded out, or how do
Oh
you?
boy.
What
My
Catherine said
process,
plus.
yeah, my process is very unusual in that I think what I did was I wrote pieces of this book over time. I wrote, scenes over time. I wrote history sections over time. I knew I had pieces of it. And then once I wrote my proposal, I knew I had, a sense of how I wanted to structure the book. The hardest part for me as a journalist, someone who I know, I told my editor of this book that the thing I needed most to get this book published was a strong editor, because as an editor myself, a journalist, I knew how to write a news story. I could write a magazine story. I could write a podcast. I could produce a podcast. I could do it video, but I don't know how to do a book. It's too big. So that can be very overwhelming for authors. And she said, you have two narratives, and you need to basically move your both narratives forward in every chapter, and then you put a piece of history, weave your history, drop some history in each one. So when she said that, and she said the word braided memoir, I was like, okay, every chapter moves both narratives forward and history. So that became like kind of like a formula, a recipe for me. And then it kind of clicked. And then I realized, oh, okay, now I know I can map out my chapters. And then what I did was I said, I'm going to write, I gave myself a year to write it. I wrote a chapter a month. And then I kind of like took pieces that I had written before and I just edited them. And then I found sections that I needed to rewrite entirely. I found new sections that I needed to write first, for the first time. I threw out probably half of what I had written before, but it became this wonderful, beautiful puzzle that I was putting together by the end. And some of the history ended up changing and moving around. But anyway, that's what my goal became. And then and I wrote the book between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. every other day. And then I worked my butt off covering the Trump administration last time. So it all worked out.
So I am going to get to all your questions, but there's one that seems connected, which is how did you choose your editor? How'd you know you found the right
Oh,
fit?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, good question. I chose my editor because she had done a braided memoir books before. And I thought, okay, this is a woman who had done another memoir. I forget what it's called, but she had done a memoir of like a kind of similar book of a woman who wrote a book about her kind of like a woman whose ancestors were slaves in Maryland, and there was like a similar story that she was trying a mystery in her family she was trying to unravel and cover. And I was like, and it kind of also told a story about history of a place as well as her own, family history. And I thought, okay, this I don't know how many of you have done this, but I think leading up to this, I would study other memoir. I would study other books and like just for their structure. I would like, go to the library and be like, okay. And this is kind of how I learned to be a journalist too. I would study newspaper stories because I was started as a newspaper reporter. So I literally studied paragraph one is what, paragraph two is what is the job of every right piece of the writing. And so I try to approach that like, how is this writer? I wouldn't even like really care about the story. I just wanted to know like, how is chapter one, chapter two, or and so I'm not sure like that was super, I didn't copy paste any of that for my book, but it was helpful to know like, at least that there's something I could follow to some degree when you have a complicated story. And not every story is that complicated, but um, and then that like each chapter kind of has to like you want to keep the reader engaged. And I think that's the other thing. Like I really knew that I want the reader to turn the page, and you have to be really focused on who your reader is the whole time, and you have to um, not be precious about like what you care about. You have to be really focused on what the reader cares about, and so you have to be, just, tough on your own self. And
Well, how do you know what the reader wants?
well, if you ask yourself, do I need this, or is this too much, or, is this going on too long? The answer is probably yes.
Fair, fair. And I actually, when I write, a lot of times I'll put in a headline. I don't like comments. I'll put in a bolded headline to remind myself what the next paragraph is going to be that I'll take out later. It's not cheating, people. Uh, so getting back to the chat questions, I was in Oahu and the Maui fire erupted, devastating to say the least. Did you address that and the fire and the aftermath in your book? Was anyone in your family affected? And if that's too personal, the commenter apologizes.
Yeah, good question. I did that happened towards the end of me of my writing of the book. So I did get it in the epilogue. And luckily none of my direct family members were affected. Our family lives on the other side of Maui on the east side, and Lahaina's on the west side. My cousin's wife's cousin died in the fire, so I didn't know him directly, but a really young man in his 20s with two young kids. So everyone knows someone who did because it's a small island. And my uncle worked for months and months. He runs a construction company and turned his construction company into a debris removal company for months and months to uh, help with the cleanup. And so did my cousin. So everyone is still hurting and from that fire. It's far from uh, that being recovered. It's really tough. It's really tough. It's a really very tough situation there because people can't afford to live there, and it's a place that's going through some very difficult questions of who is this land for? It's really about the Aina. Is it for tourists or is it for local people? When there's a lot of need for housing, and there's a lot of housing, but it's empty because it is owned by people who don't live there, and it's a vacation home. That's tough, really tough. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you. Back to the chat questions. How did you pitch the book? Was it completed or or just an idea? And I'd actually ask you to frame that. I think that's actually a question about nonfiction versus fiction and the agenting process. Throw in
Yeah.
what was your path to publication on top of that. And again, I'm sort of thinking fiction, nonfiction.
Yeah.
Feel free to
So,
lead the witness.
well, yeah, so I don't know anything about fiction pitching. So my journey was very long. I told you it took me more than a dozen years. I first tried to pitch this story as a very different kind of book, and it was not successful. That was probably in 2010 or no, 2012, I would say. I pitched the book, and it was really like I think it was like the mysteries of the secrets of the temple, I think is what I called it. And so it was about like my journey back to Hawaii to understand like the mysteries of a temple. And I had characters and, but ultimately I realized that like there's a lot of interest in it. I think that I got a lot of, had a few calls, but ultimately I got, books about Hawaii. Like none of the editors I met had ever been to Hawaii. They were not like sure how to make it sell, like, or how to sell it, or, they were just not unclear like how to make it work. And so that was
Excuse me,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said editors. Are you talking about, no, you're not talking about agents?
Oh, no, no, I had an agent. I did have an agent. So I was able to
Okay.
get an agent. Sorry. Um, but when we went to market with it, the editors at the publishing houses were interested, but couldn't like, no one bought it.
Was it a
Um,
proposal or the full book?
the proposal. Yeah. So when you're in nonfiction, you don't need to write the whole book. You just write a proposal, which is like a mini book. So it was like, I don't know, 60 pages, something like that. Um, And so that was very disappointing, and I felt a bit defeated. But I also was like, okay, I just need to work on it a bit more. So I didn't feel like it wasn't going to happen because, again, I had the dream. I was like, it's going to happen. And then fast forward, I kept, doing interviews. I kept doing research, and then my agent also quit. My agent left the literary world. And I was like, well, this sucks. So I had to find another agent.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. So I had a
nightmare,
series of
nightmare.
setbacks. Yeah, I hope this is like, yeah, hopefully inspiring. So I had a series of setbacks. Then I have a lot of journalist friends who've written books. So my other friends introduced me to another agent, and I told him about what I wanted to write about. He said, "Oh, this is interesting," and he was great. His name is Howard Yoon, and he spent a lot of time with me, probably 2 years, developing this proposal and finally he's like, Sarah, this is a memoir. And I was like, I guess so. He really helped to sell this book. And I'll be honest with you, I think what sold my book was it was a memoir. I refashioned the story with better characters, a better narrative, two narratives, not about a temple, but about a personal story. And the events kind of overtook it. And I'll tell you honestly, I think George Floyd happening also sold this book because suddenly publishers were interested in stories about history they didn't know. And that was not the case before. So I don't know if that's the case today. I hope it is. But yes.
So, I mean, I think that one of my many takeaways from all that you just said is something that I've learned in literary world is that one of the real factors to author success is persistence and believing in your own project.
Yes,
Um,
100%. That's my advice is if you feel like you have a book inside you and you know you do, don't ever give up. And think about who it's for. Who is this book for? Because it's then to me like it's about finding the right publisher and the right audience. It will find its way. You just have to do that right matchmaking, right? And so you want to find a publisher who understands your story, and it's really like you're assembling your team as you go. Like I was not going to sell a book until I found the agent who was like, I'm on team Sarah and I'm on team Maui. And I'm gonna like, I see the story and there's a story that needs to be told here. And her story needs to be told. And then it wasn't until we found Bryn at, Flatiron Books who was like, I see Sarah's story needs to be told. This is important. Right. And so it's me and Howard and Bryn, you know, and we, then published it and fashioned the story in the way it needed to be to be told in the best way to reach the audience it needed to reach. So those are all important steps along the journey. And so you just have to be patient with yourself and believe in yourself. And the other thing is, as I told myself, no one is going to write this book but you. So it's not going to write itself. So that's whenever I would get discouraged and I'd be like, damn, this is taking so long. I'd be like, Sarah, it's not going to write itself. You got to do it. So,
There are no shortcuts. Well, that's a whole other topic. So I feel like that answer put us at a fork of two different directions, um, in terms of your own personal journey, in terms of who inspired you. This is from the chat. What were the models you read for how to write your own work? So that's the inner journey, as well as the outer journey of social media. How important was that to your agent publisher? So what was driving you forward, and what was driving the agent slash publisher forward?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I tried to be a little too clever by half. So I'm going to
Okay.
split those up. Who inspired you? What were the models you read for how to write your own work?
Hmm. Well, I'm a lover of nonfiction books. I'm a lover of history. I feel like, the truth is stranger than fiction and better than fiction, but I'm a journalist, so I'm biased that way. And I really admire, great storytellers who tell me something about history that I don't know. So I'm a fan of like Isabel Wilkerson and writers like that. And, I don't know, I read, all the biographies of, Frederick Douglass and, the Hemmingses and, all those. I love anything that I can absorb that is taking me to a place and informing me more deeply with characters that I can follow and get excited about. I love even I love Geraldine Brooks, who like does that in a more fictional way. And so those are writers that kind of inspire me. And I try to emulate their storytelling ability as well as their research methods, their deep kind of understanding and like just mastery of their subjects, and the context in which their subjects lived is something I've always admired. And to write with that authority and confidence, I think is important.
Yeah. The second barely connected part of my question is about the role of social media. Were you what people talk a lot about platform and reach and all that. Is that how did
Yeah.
that how'd you experience that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, um, it's one thing to write the book. It's another thing to sell the book. It's another thing, it's another thing to write the book. One thing to write the book, it's another thing to get the book published. And it's another huge job to actually sell the book to people. And all of those things require you with your full attention. And so I've always been told by other author friends that, don't rely on your publisher to just promote the book and that's it. And like life is a wonderful book party or tour. It's really not. I literally booked almost every single interview I did, every earned media. And I it's that every one of those is like, 10 emails back and forth and, a lot of asking, a lot of requests, a lot of calling every single person and, social media is a lot of work. And so you should start now. And just start carving out your expertise in whatever it is that you're writing about, if you're not already building that audience. And think about where, probably your audience is where you are, where you hang out. And I think it helps to also build an audience on platforms like Goodreads, I think. I wish I had done that. I don't think that I wish I had done that. I didn't really build that out, but I didn't have time. Um, so that's my advice. You know, uh, it's a lot of effort, and I wasn't working full time. By the time that book came out, I decided to stop working full time and focus 100% on just marketing the book, and I'm so glad I did. Mhm.
So, how many years into that decade did you actually sell it? So, had you finished? Where where, where did the sale come in? SALE.
Um, boy, I think that the let's see, I'm trying to time. Where does time? Time has gone by so fast. Let's see, the book published in June, and so I believe that in 2024, early 2024, perhaps it got sold. Is that right? Yeah. So then yeah, is that right? Or maybe it was late 2023. Anyway, something like that. Around that time is when it was sold, and then I spent a year writing it, and then it took 6 months to publish. 6 months to from then to like get to market, something like that. So,
Interesting. Um,
mhm.
so there's a question in the chat which isn't about writing as much as a chance to ask you as a Hawaiian. After the fire, um, is over tourism. Do you feel that speaking for Hawaiians, um, that over tourism is that tourism is welcome right now or not?
Oh,
And that gets
oh,
into a lot of
yeah.
issues that you cover in the book.
Yeah, I do, and I think actually just wrote a story about this for the Washington Post, about how a lot of Native Hawaiians have actually stepped into quite big of leadership roles in the tourism um business, or not really tourism business, I would say more tourism leadership roles in the state, to be more culturally inclusive, and that has been a huge change. And so when you land in the airport, you'll hear Hawaiian language spoken at the airport. On the radio, you'll hear that in like a lot of the marketing brochures. They're incorporating that now. So that is something that is not an accident, but something that they're trying to incorporate more local businesses into the tourist experience, and more authentic experiences in general, like authentic hula, And so that is, I don't, I hope that continues. And I think that the local communities really depend on tourism and need it, right? It's like 80% of the economy. But I think that they want to have a balance, they want to make sure that their home is affordable, and that isn't really about so much just there's a piece of it that's like managing tourism and making sure that, like, sensitive, ecologically sensitive areas are managed. There's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is like more about, second homes that are owned by people who don't live there. And that's not really so much tourism, but more wealthy investors, and that are driving up property taxes and not really contributing to the local community. So,
That that's when you read the book, you'll see that, Sarah. I really felt like you used facts about who has bought, what ridiculously large parcels of land for numbers that I don't even understand. Um, becomes part of the frustration of, as you're trying to figure out your role as someone living on the mainland,
mhm,
connected. And as you said, where the average people are, homeless, and the average price of a house is 1.3 million. It's just
yeah,
because they're empty.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Good question, though.
Ooh,
Thank you.
we are running low on time. I want to throw in at least one question that I really want to ask, and you didn't take it out when I sent you the question. So, um,
Great
I
questions.
don't want to deprive I don't want to deprive readers of the aha moment that I had, where you. So it's up to you how much you want to say, but you took you start with the history of Hawaii, and in the end, there's a contemporary, pivotal historical event that we all went through. And I thought that it bookended
Hmm.
the book. I just said that, in just very satisfying, disturbing but satisfying way. Can you talk about that?
Um,
Do you know what
well,
I'm talking about?
yeah, I think you should say more. I think you should say
Okay,
more.
okay. It's about the way that disease that Westerners spread disease in Hawaii, and the way that disease was spread here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's very well known. And that's another kind of section of history that I wanted to make people more aware of. I mean, I assume most people didn't know that. I didn't know that. But, the story of Native Hawaiian population, when we were living through COVID, Hawaii really shut down its borders, and was one of the most was one of the first states to really clamp down on allowing flights in or and quarantine, and was one of the last to lift that. And the reasons were it was not a coincidence. It was because of the history of that place, and how diseases have ravaged the community on an island where, has not been protected from disease. And, the history of the Hawaiian people is that, the very first ship, Captain Cook and his men infected the Hawaiian people with disease. And within, 50 years of their arrival, it was like, half the population was gone, was infected, and it was wave after wave. So it's very similar, of course, to other Native American experiences. But on an island, of course, there's nowhere to go to escape that. And, I chronicled and found in those old Hawaiian newspapers, reports of death and disease. It's just all over those newspapers. And in books, I found writings of missionaries and other foreigners and businessmen wondering, like, when is the population going to be, when are the Native Hawaiians going to be extinct? Is it going to be this year or next year? Is it going to be in 10 years or 20 years? And so it was, it's kind of a miracle, really. I feel like, as a Native Hawaiian woman, I am a survivor of that. We all are. I think during COVID, I think when we were thinking and living through that, I think I was thinking a lot about that through line as well.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, to me, that just was an astonishing bookend of, like, wait a minute, it was early the early years of Westerners in Hawaii was, an unchecked pandemic with no central statistics.
Yeah. 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 And it was also a mental health thing too, because when you had missionaries that were telling your people you're dying because you don't believe in God
Oh,
and Jesus, that was, it was like you're, a sickly race. I mean, that was really the story that they were told. And you believe in you worship pagan idols, and anyway, so that was the narrative that that Native Hawaiian people came to believe about themselves. And so it was really um, sad to read that. But I could see how I also understood how that could become part of the psyche of an entire group of people. Yeah. Sorry to leave you on a sad note. I feel like we should
I was
end
going
with
to say,
something
so
happy.
we are actually, yeah, we are out of time, but so we do end up on a positive note. I'm
Yeah.
going to, I mean, listen, I mean, that's part of what makes the book so compelling, is learning what I didn't know that I
Yeah.
should have known, and I'm glad to know.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like people have the impression on this call, hopefully, that it's like, it's not actually such a downer story.
Oh,
There's actually some good news by the end. There is like a somewhat happy ending. But for me, I really loved writing the story and sharing it with people who are curious about Hawaii, who love history, who maybe have visited once, but are, really want to know it in a deeper way. And the wonderful thing for me has been hearing from readers. And I love, talking about writing with you all. So it's been wonderful. And for me, another bookend for me is that I recently returned to the Washington Post. And I write about my time coming to Washington, why I moved here is for the Washington Post. And then I left. And then anyway, so I could come back I care about the institution. I care about journalism. I want it to thrive into the future. That's been nice. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Again, I'm going to urge everybody to buy the book. I found it inspiring. I did not find it a downer. I found it just a really emotional, beautiful story. So, yeah, thanks for giving us a different outlook on the beautiful Hawaii. So,
Oh,
thank
thank
you
you
all for
for your
coming.
great questions. I'm just reading the chat now, but thank you so much. It's been great to talk with you.
And I'm going to find the link and throw the link in so you can buy the book.
Oh, thank you. Yes. All right.
Who's
Thanks,
giving her
everybody.
first?
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you.
all.
Okay. Good night or good morning.
Or good morning for some of us here. I saw
Yeah.
Sydney as well.
Okay. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Zach.
Oh, the audiobook. Oh, we didn't even get to talk. Somebody just
Thank you.
bought the audiobook. I didn't get
Oh,
to talk to you
oh, oh.
about the fact that you recorded it yourself. So
I did. It was great. It took a long time though. It took a week. Well, so
wait,
anyway.
10 years. What's time?
All right. Good night. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.